Kazım was a young man blessed with wealth and striking good looks. He had everything he could possibly desire, yet one flaw overshadowed his seemingly perfect life: he was spoiled. He had grown accustomed to always getting his way. Despite his demanding nature, Kazım had found love in a beautiful young woman named Adaugo. He was Yoruba, and she was Igbo, from Anambra State. Their paths had crossed when Adaugo traveled to Ibadan for her youth service. The moment she met Kazım, she was swept off her feet. He showered her with extravagant gifts, draped her in luxury, and lavished her with attention. For Adaugo, it was love at first sight. She knew, however, that their love was forbidden. Her parents, especially her father, Chief Anao, would never accept her marrying outside her tribe. In their family, traditions were deeply rooted, and it was unheard of for an Anambra woman, particularly the first daughter, to marry a man from another ethnic group. But love knows no boundaries, and Adaugo, captivated by Kazım's charm, ignored the looming consequences. Their love story unfolded like a dream. Just before Adaugo completed her youth service, Kazım proposed. He knelt before her, nervous yet hopeful, and with a gleam in his eyes, he asked, "Adaugo, my love, will you marry me?" Overwhelmed with joy, Adaugo flung herself into his arms and exclaimed, "Yes, I will marry you, my love." It was the happiest moment of her life. But her joy was soon clouded by fear. A few nights later, she sat on her bed, deep in thought, troubled by the reaction she knew awaited her back home. She shared her fears with Kazım when they met at a restaurant. "I am scared," she admitted. "I don't know how my father will react when he finds out that the man I want to spend my life with is Yoruba." Kazım, always confident, chuckled and reassured her. "Put your mind at ease, my love. You worry too much. Just take a good look at me. Who could possibly resist me? I am a full package and more." Adaugo sighed, trying to embrace his optimism. "I pray so. I hope my father sees what I see in you, because I can't live without you." A few weeks later, they embarked on a journey to Nui, to formally seek her father's blessing. But their visit was met with hostility. The moment Chief Anao laid eyes on Kazım and heard his daughter's intentions, he erupted in fury. "What kind of madness is this?" he bellowed. "Why would you disgrace me by bringing a Yoruba man into my house? Do you know how many eligible young men from our own people are waiting to marry you?" His voice shook the walls as he raged at Adaugo. Without hesitation, he chased Kazım out of the house, humiliating him in front of the entire family. In the days that followed, Chief Anao took extreme measures. He locked Adaugo inside the house, seized her phone, and forbade her from leaving. She spent her days in tears, imprisoned in her own home, longing for Kazım. But love has a way of defying even the strongest chains. One night, Adaugo found a way to escape. Under the cover of darkness, she slipped out of her father's house, made her way to the nearest park, and boarded a bus back to Ibadan. The moment she arrived at Kazım's house, he embraced her with uncontainable joy. They held each other tightly, as though they had been apart for years. Her father called repeatedly, his voice thick with rage when she finally answered. "Where are you?" he demanded. "I have gone to be with the man I love," she said, her voice unwavering. Chief Anao was furious, but Adaugo no longer cared. A few weeks later, she married Kazım, defying her father's wishes. The first months of their marriage were blissful. Kazım adored her, and she felt like the happiest woman alive. However, as time passed, she longed to reconnect with her family and seek their forgiveness. One evening, she broached the topic with Kazım, hoping he would understand. But his reaction shocked her. His face darkened with anger, and he shouted, "Not while I am alive. You will never call or visit your family again. Have you forgotten how your father disgraced me? A whole me. He threw me out like I was nothing. Now I am your husband, and under my roof, you will do as I say." Adaugo was taken aback but assumed his anger would fade with time. She was wrong. Days later, Kazım broke her SIM card, ensuring she had no means of contacting her family. He forbade her from making new friends in Ibadan and refused to let her get a job, even though she was educated. At first, she saw no harm in it. He provided for her, showered her with gifts, and spent time with her. She thought it was his way of loving her, until everything changed. Kazım began staying out late. He no longer doted on her. The once loving husband who couldn't stand to be away from her now barely acknowledged her presence. He stopped giving her money for food, buying his own meals instead, while she went hungry. The worst part was the rumors, whispers of him seeing other women. Adaugo's heart ached with suspicion, and one day, her worst fears were confirmed. She discovered that Kazım was unfaithful. Devastated, she confronted him the moment he returned home. "Why are you doing this to me?" she screamed through her tears. "I left my family for you. I gave up everything for you. And this is how you repay me." Instead of apologizing, Kazım's face twisted with rage. Without warning, he struck her. Adaugo collapsed to the floor, stunned. She had never imagined he would raise his hand against her. But his cruelty did not end there. As punishment for questioning him, he locked the kitchen, ensuring she had no food, and confiscated her phone. She was trapped in the house, starving, humiliated, and powerless. For 3 days, she endured hunger, her body weak, her spirit broken. When Kazım finally returned, she fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "Please, forgive me." Kazım looked down at her, his expression unreadable. "I have heard you," he said coldly. "But you need to learn a lesson." Though he claimed to have forgiven her, he continued his punishment. He left her to starve for 3 more days. Adaugo, once a vibrant, hopeful young woman, was now a prisoner in her own home. Her world had shrunk to nothing but walls and silence. She had no friends to turn to, no family to seek comfort from. She had severed all ties for love, only to find herself drowning in loneliness, trapped in a marriage that had turned into a nightmare. As the days passed, she felt herself slipping into despair. She had once believed that love could conquer anything, but now, she realized, love without freedom was nothing but a beautiful prison. Adaugo sat alone in the dimly lit room, her arms wrapped around her knees as tears streamed down her face. The silence of the house was deafening, broken only by her own muffled sobs. She had once thought that marrying Kazım was the best decision of her life, but now, trapped within the walls of his home, she realized how wrong she had been. "Why didn't I listen to my father?" she whispered to herself, rocking gently. "Why did I think love was enough? If I had married a man from my tribe, would he have treated me like this? Now, look at me. A prisoner in my own home, with no friends, no job, and no one to even notice that I've been locked away for days. Nobody will come looking for me." Her tears fell faster as the weight of her isolation crushed her spirit. She had given up everything for Kazım, her family, her friendships, her independence, and in return, he had stripped her of every ounce of dignity. Kazım, on the other hand, took pleasure in his cruelty. He saw Adaugo's brokenness and reveled in it, pushing her further into despair. The more she cried, the more power he felt he had over her. He withheld food, freedom, even simple kindness, turning their once loving marriage into a nightmare. Days turned into years, and Adaugo became a shell of the vibrant woman she once was. But one morning, as she sat in front of the mirror staring at her hollow reflection, something inside her snapped. She straightened her back, wiped away her tears, and spoke aloud to herself. "Adaugo, have you forgotten who you are? Have you forgotten whose daughter you are? You are the daughter of Chief Anao. A lion does not birth a goat. You are strong. You are powerful. You are not this weak, broken woman Kazım has tried to make you. This ends today." That night, Kazım returned home to a sight he had never expected. Adaugo was dressed in a stunning red gown, her face beautifully made up, her lips painted a deep shade of crimson. The house smelled of sweet perfume, and candlelight flickered across the walls. Soft music played in the background, and the dining table was set elegantly, though no food had been prepared. Kazım froze in the doorway, his eyes wide in surprise. "Adaugo, what is going on?" he asked, skepticism evident in his voice. She smiled, a soft, sultry smile that made his heart race. "My king, my crown," she purred, walking toward him and placing a gentle hand on his chest. "I have been such a foolish wife, questioning your authority, fighting your decisions. But now, I understand. You are my lord. You own me. I have no business reaching out to my father or old friends. If you choose to have 1,000 women, it is your right as a man. I was wrong to ever challenge you. Kazım's ego swelled at her words. He let out a satisfied chuckle, pulling Adaugo into a tight embrace. The woman he had once broken now seemed to worship him, and it pleased him immensely. That night, they lay together in their matrimonial bed, and for the first time in years, Kazım let his guard down completely. Adaugo, however, had a plan. With each passing day, she continued to play the role of the obedient, doting wife. She showered Kazım with affection, massaged his ego with sweet words, and made him believe she had truly submitted to him. Slowly, he began to change. He stopped locking the kitchen, gave her access to money again, and even showered her with gifts. He no longer treated her like a prisoner, trusting that she had finally accepted her place. But while Kazım basked in his newfound control, Adaugo was working in the shadows. Every time he left for work, she searched the house for anything of value. She found documents for his properties, title deeds, and important business papers. And over the next few weeks, she secretly sold everything he owned. One evening, Kazım returned home, expecting the usual warm welcome from his wife. But as he approached their house, he noticed something strange. The front door had a new lock, and a bold red sign hung above it. Sold. His heart pounded in his chest. He pulled out his phone and dialed Adaugo's number, but she didn't pick up. He tried again and again, each time met with silence. Panic set in as realization dawned. He had been outplayed. Meanwhile, Adaugo had already made her way back to Nui. She stood before her father, tears in her eyes as she knelt before him. "Papa, I was wrong. I should have listened to you. Please, forgive me." Chief Aneo looked at his daughter for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, with a deep sigh, he pulled her into a tight embrace. "My child, you were lost, but you have found your way back home. That is all that matters." Kazım never dared to go after her. He knew that stepping foot into Chief Aneo's compound would be a grave mistake. And so, he remained in Lagos, a broken man. His wealth was gone, his status destroyed, and his once unshakable confidence had crumbled. He lost his job soon after, unable to focus, and fell into ruin. As he sat alone, staring at the emptiness of his life, he realized his greatest mistake. If only he had treated Adaugo with love and respect, perhaps his fate would have been different. But it was too late. Adaugo had won.